There's a Ute sitting on a hoist in front of me, and it's 4 years old. Not 40, 4. And I can put my thumb straight through the rear quarter of the tray like it's a wet wheat Bix box. Orange flakes coming off in my hand, the metal underneath gone soft and brown. This truck was sold to a bloke as a strong, tough workhorse, built for the beach, the bush, the salt, anywhere you point it. He believed that. Why wouldn't he? It was on the telly, on the radio, all over his feed, a shiny truck powering down a beach with a caption promising it could handle anything you threw at it. He paid the better part of 40 grand for it, brand new, off the showroom floor. And here it is on my hoist, being quoted for rust repairs that cost more than the truck is now worth, because nobody wants a rusty one on the used market, and the value's already fallen through the floor. He didn't buy a bad truck. He bought a promise that the metal couldn't keep. I've had a lot of these cheap Utes through the shop over the last few years. The wave that came out of China landed here in Australia hard and fast and undercut everything by 15, 20, 30 grand. And I'll be straight with you, because that's the only way I know how to do this. Some of them are genuinely all right. A couple are even cleverer than the trucks they're chasing. But a lot of them are going to leave the person who bought them poorer, angrier, and more stranded than they ever expected. And the reasons why aren't the ones you'd guess. It's not always that they break. Sometimes it's that they can't be fixed, or can't be sold, or the company that sold it to you quietly packs up and walks out the door and takes your warranty with it. So here's what I'm going to do. 12 of them. Ranked roughly from the ones you'll just grumble about to the ones that'll genuinely hurt you. And for each one, I'm going to give you the real reason, the mechanical reason, the money reason, and the one at the very bottom, that's the single worst buy of the lot. Stay for that one, especially, because it's the one people are still walking into showrooms and signing for right now this week and doing the maths after they get home instead of before. Before I start, let me show you the one thread that runs through every single truck on this list, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. For decades, the deal with a work ute was simple, and it was honest. You paid a fair whack up front, you got something you could pull apart with hand tools in your own shed on a Sunday, and it held its value so well you could sell it a decade later and still get real money back. A HiLux, an old cruiser, boring, overbuilt, proven, cast iron where it mattered, simple where it counted, and half the country knew how to fix one. The new deal is the exact opposite of that in every way. Cheap sticker up front to get you in the door, a sealed box full of software you are locked out of, and a truck that can shed a third of its value in a single year and be an orphan by the time it's out of warranty. Keep that comparison in your head. Every ute on this list is just a different flavor of that same trade. Cheap now, expensive later. So let's go through them. Number 12, and I'm starting near the top with one that's actually pretty good, which is exactly why people are surprised when they end up grumpy. The GWM Cannon Alpha, the big hybrid and plug-in hybrid one. On paper, it's a genuine achievement, and I won't pretend otherwise. It tows the full 3.5 tons, it's got real off-road gear, low range, diff locks, and a cabin that honestly feels like proper money. Charged up around town, it barely sips fuel. Here's the catch, and it's a physics catch, not a marketing one. This thing weighs about 2,800 kilos empty. That is a colossal amount of truck for a 2-litre petrol engine to lug around. So the second that battery goes flat, and you're on the highway, or you've got a load in the tray, or you're towing, that headline fuel figure they wave at you, under 2 litres per 100, just evaporates. Real owners see 11, 12, and up past 15 when they tow. That's no better than a diesel half its size. Load it to tow the full whack and your payload drops to almost nothing. A few hundred kilos, gone before you've put 4 blokes and an esky in it. And to fit that big battery, they've bolted the spare wheel upright in the tray under a cheap bit of plastic, because there was physically nowhere else for it to go. It's not a bad truck. It's just heavier, thirstier under load, and more complicated than the ad let on. The driver nanny beeps at you until you dig through a menu every single time you start it, and the price has quietly crept up toward the established brands it was supposed to be undercutting in the first place. Number 11, the absolute darling of the whole segment, the BYD Shark 6. This one's a genuine sales phenomenon. Over 24,000 sold, third best-selling ute in the country, some months, and I completely understand why. It's quick, it's quiet, it's loaded with gear, and if you commute on electric and charge at home, it's dirt cheap to run. The regret is very specific. and it's the tradies and the towers who feel it. The version most people bought towers only 2.5 tons, not the 3.5, that's the class benchmark, and the payload's on the light side too. Here's the mechanical reason, because it matters. It's got fully independent coil suspension at the rear, which is lovely on the road, but it's the reason it can't carry or tow like a leaf-sprung workhorse. It wears an all-wheel drive badge, not four-wheel drive. There's no low range and no locking diffs. And off-road, it leans on the front axle, and its hill descent needed the driver to grab the brakes to stop it rolling away. And here's the one that really catches people out. Plug a trailer in, and it drops into a towing mode that switches off the auto emergency braking, switches off the lane keeping, and caps you at 110. Tow with it, and that clever little fuel number becomes 17 litres per 100. BYD's since rushed out a performance version, a whole year later, that lifts the towing to 3.5 and adds a crawl mode for the rough stuff, which tells you everything you need to know. They fixed it because it needed fixing. Number 10, the Foton Tunland, the V7 and V9. And this one arrives carrying history, because Foton already had a crack at Australia once, years back, and got quietly laughed out of the room when its old Cummins diesel couldn't meet emissions and the brand slunk off. Now it's back, fresh truck, big name distributor, and credit where it's due, it's a proper effort with a co-developed diesel and a good gearbox. But the launch was full of the kind of thing that tells you it wasn't quite baked yet. It landed without an independent crash rating, which matters enormously to the fleet buyers it's chasing. It couldn't legally tow its own advertised 3.5 tons at first, because the tow bar hadn't been signed off, and the little stuff was maddening in a way that wears you down daily. The climate control couldn't hold a steady temperature, blowing hot then cold with no middle ground. The stereo turns its own volume down every time another car gets near you, which in city traffic is basically always. You can't switch the engine off until it's in park. There's a heavy tug of regen braking every time you lift off. Fewer than 200 of them sold in the early months, split across both models. That's the market voting with its feet and its wallet. Number 9, the JAC T9. Now, JAC has been building trucks in China for 60 years, so the badge behind it isn't nothing, and the T9 looks the part. But it's a masterclass in reading the fine print. They marketed it hard as the safest ute in the country off the back of a 5-star crash score. And yet critics pointed out it was actually missing an airbag you'd expect standard on any new vehicle, and its auto braking had a genuine blind spot in a very Australian driving scenario. Before it even launched, the towing rating got quietly trimmed down from the headline 3.5 tons. The engine's a low-output 2-litre bolted to a decent ZF gearbox, but it lags badly off the mark. You plant your foot and not much happens for a beat. And here's the tell that worries me most as a value man. It was being discounted heavily from the very first day it went on sale. When a car's on special before it's even had a chance to get warm, that's the market whispering to you about what the resale is going to look like in 3 years. Sales have since collapsed, fewer than 60 in a recent month. And one reviewer who bought one, brand new, found the factory hadn't even bothered to grease a rubber boot in the steering rack. Little things. But little things are the whole story with a truck. Number 8, the MG U9. This one's fascinating because it isn't really its own truck at all. It's an LDV wearing an MG badge because both brands belong to the same enormous Chinese state-owned parent. And they've simply taken one truck, slapped 2 different badges on it, and now sell them against each other through separate dealer networks. That's old-school badge engineering, the sort of shell game that used to embarrass car companies. And here's what should make you stop and think. MG is normally famous for a massive 10-year warranty on everything it sells. On this ute, and only this ute, they cut it to 5. When a company shortens its own warranty on one specific model, you want to ask yourself why they're not confident. On top of that, reviewers driving the pre-production trucks reported worrying signs of wear and tear already showing, which raises real questions about how these hold up down the track. It's got a clever fold-down gate between the tub and the cabin for long loads, which is genuinely neat. But the payload's low, so tow anything heavy, and you've barely got room left over for people and gear. And the safety systems were flagged as over-eager and needing recalibration. Sharp price, big plush cabin, and a whole lot of unknowns riding underneath it. Number 7, and this is the twin I just mentioned, the LDV Terron 9. Same parent company, same basic donor truck as the MG, but this is the one wearing the LDV badge, running cheaper leaf spring suspension out the back instead of the MG's coils, and sold by an entirely different importer. So you've got two nearly identical trucks, same silhouette, near identical numbers even in the names, fighting each other in the same showrooms across the country. And the thing you're really signing up for here is a brand new, unproven, very large ute from a badge that, as you're about to hear in about 90 seconds, is carrying the single biggest reliability cloud in this entire segment. Buying the newest, biggest, most expensive product from a maker whose older product is the reason half this video exists takes a very particular kind of optimism. I admire it. I wouldn't spend my own money on it. Number 6, the truck that kicked off this whole cheap ute stampede, the standard GWM Cannon diesel. This is the one that proved Australians would buy a Chinese ute in serious numbers, and for the money it is a lot of vehicle. But it's also where I see the most people genuinely, quietly fed up. The big one is the diesel particulate filter, so let me explain what's actually happening. That filter's job is to trap soot from the exhaust, and every so often the truck needs to run hot on a decent highway stint to burn that soot off. Drive one of these mostly around town, short trips, never a proper long run, and that filter clogs. The truck drops into limp mode with barely any power, and you're stranded? Owners describe it happening on the freeway with a trailer on the back. There was a recall on nearly 3,000 of them because the wrong type of lubricant went onto a fuel filter seal at the factory, which could let diesel leak out over time. Gearboxes dropping into outright failure. Constant vibration buzzing through the cabin on some. And the part I hear about most isn't even the truck itself. It's the customer service after. People describing being brushed off so hard for so long that they've ended up in front of consumer tribunals just to get someone to listen. Number 5, the Deepal E07, the one they've branded a multi-truck. This is a gimmick given metal. It's an electric SUV where the rear window drops down and the back seats fold flat, so it magically becomes a little ute with a tray, then folds back into an SUV. Clever party trick, I'll give them that, but it launched straight into a stop sale and then a formal recall, because it may have been missing a child seat anchor point in the middle rear seat, which is exactly the sort of basic non-negotiable safety box you'd assume a brand new car had already ticked before it ever reached a customer. And it comes from a brand new mark sold here by an importer that has, in just the last little while, dropped 2 other car brands from its books entirely, which is the perfect place to talk about the part of this list that has nothing to do with how any of these trucks actually drive. It's about what happens to you after the sale. Number 4, and I'll be honest that this one's a warning shot rather than a truck you've already regretted because it's only just landing on our shores. Sherry, the outfit behind a whole heap of cheap SUVs already crawling around Australia, is bringing a plug-in ute to market, and the marketing machine is spinning up. Here's exactly why I'm putting it on the list before it's properly even on sale. Sherry's own SUVs are among the very fastest depreciating vehicles in this entire country. One popular model has shed over 40% of its value in barely 12 months. 40%. You drive it home from the dealer, and a year later, almost half your money has simply vanished into thin air. There is nothing wrong with the truck being new. There is something very wrong with paying near full price for something the used market is already discounting this savagely. And here's the mechanism behind that so you understand it isn't bad luck. When a brand keeps cutting the price of its brand new cars to chase sales, every used one already out there has to fall in value to match. Because why would anyone pay you more for your used one than a brand new one now costs? The price cut you'll see advertised next year is coming straight out of your pocket today. Number 3, and this is the used market trap. The old Great Wall Utes, the V-Series and the Steed. Because plenty of people right now in 2026 are scrolling the classifieds, looking at a dirt cheap Chinese ute from that very first wave. 10 grand looks like an absolute bargain, why not? Here's the history you need. Great Wall first came here around 2009, cheap and cheerful, and the build quality and the crash scores were so poor that the brand had to retreat entirely and rebuild before it came back years later as GWM. So those early trucks are orphans now? Parts are hard to get, the safety gear is a full generation behind anything modern, and the little engines have their known gremlins in the timing and the top end. That 10 grand bargain turns into a money pit the very first time something lets go, and you discover the part has to come from overseas, if it can be found at all, and sits your truck in my shop for 6 weeks waiting. Cheap to buy has never once been the same thing as cheap to own, not for one single day in the history of the motor car. Number 2, the LDV T60. This is the truck on my hoist right now, and it's the one I really want you to understand, because it's the clearest example going of what happens when you buy a badge that hasn't earned your trust yet. The problem is rust, and not a bit of surface scale you sand back on a weekend. Trucks corroding clean through within about 5 years of being built. Our own consumer watchdog took LDV all the way to the federal court, alleging the company had marketed these as tough and beach-ready and salt-ready while, by the regulator's own account, it had already racked up more than 5,000 rust and corrosion complaints from owners. More than 60,000 of these things were sold here. One owner took them to a tribunal and won a full refund of around 38 grand after his truck rusted out while he worked near a surf club. The exact kind of place they'd advertised it thriving. There are owners describing their trucks written off, scrapped, no longer even registerable over rust alone. Now, LDV disputes plenty of this, and the legal question is for the courts to settle, not me. But as a mechanic, I can only tell you what my own eyes see on the hoist, and I see thin steel and poor cavity protection turning a 4-year-old truck into scrap metal. And here's the kicker. Once a brand gets tagged like that, publicly, the resale value collapses. So you can't even sell your way out of the mistake. You're stuck holding it. And number one, the single worst buy on this entire list, the LDV ET60, the all-electric version of that exact same rust-prone truck. Sit down for the price because this thing launched at around $93,000, 93 grand. And for that, here is precisely what you got. A ute that only drives 2 wheels, not 4. A towing capacity slashed to a single ton when the diesel version pulls 3. A real-world range of only around 300 kilometers, which then drops by roughly half the moment you actually hitch up and tow anything. It guzzles energy near 27 kilowatt hours per 100, which is thirsty even by electric standards. And critically, it launched missing the core safety gear buyers now take for granted: no auto emergency braking, no blind spot monitoring, no lane keep, not even ordinary cruise control, and it had no independent crash rating at all. The warranty was even shorter than the diesel versions, so you're paying full-size, top-of-the-range money for a slow, 2-wheel drive truck that can't tow, can't go the distance, is missing safety kit. A 30 grand car has a standard and is built on the very same body that's become infamous for dissolving into orange flakes. To me, that is the purest example on this whole list of a cheap badge truck sold on one big impressive sounding number, gambling that you won't stop and do the arithmetic. So do the arithmetic. Always do the arithmetic. So that's the 12. But I promised you the real reason underneath all of them, and here it is, because it was never really about any one truck. It's about the model itself. Follow the money. There is no money in selling you a ute that lasts 20 years and never comes back to bother anyone. There is a great deal of money in selling you a cheap one that you replace in 5. Think about how this actually works, step by step. An importer buys a container of trucks, sells them to you at a sharp price that looks like a genuine gift, and books that margin today done, banked. What happens tomorrow, the depreciation, the parts drought, the thin support, the rust, none of that is their problem. All of it is yours. And here's the part almost nobody spells out for you before you sign the paperwork. When you buy one of these newer badges, your contract isn't actually with some giant factory in China. It's with a local company, a distributor, an importer. And if that local company falls over, goes into administration, you don't get to ring the factory and ask nicely. You become what the lawyers call an unsecured creditor, which in plain English means you get in the queue right at the back and you get very, very little. And this is not some hypothetical I've cooked up to frighten you. It's already happening, here, now. The Australian distributor of one Chinese electric brand has already gone into administration, leaving around 2,000 owners wondering about their warranty and where on earth they'll get parts. In China itself, whole brands have gone bankrupt. One of them had sold nearly 500,000 cars, and its owners were left holding trucks with lifetime warranties that suddenly meant absolutely nothing, at service centres that had simply shut their doors, needing parts that no longer exist anywhere. The moment a brand so much as announces it's leaving a market, the used value of that car can drop 40, 50% overnight, and getting a bumper or a headlight can take 6 months instead of 2 weeks. Even our own government and the Dealer Association have started warning out loud that there are now simply too many of these brands scrapping over the same buyers, and that some of them are expanding faster then they can properly support the cars they've already put on the road. That's not me being a flag waver or a China hawk. Most of these companies build genuinely capable machines, and the engineering is often clever. It's a warning about a business model where the cheap price today is quietly paid for by you, later, in ways the shiny ad on your feed never once mentions. Here's what I reckon we've actually lost in all of this, and it's a lot bigger than any single ute. We've lost the idea that a work truck is something you own outright, in every sense of the word. Something you understand. Something you can put up on stands in your own shed on a quiet Sunday and fix yourself with a socket set and a bit of patience that'll still be worth real folding money when your kid's finally old enough to inherit it, and that you can trust 400 kilometers from the nearest town precisely because it's simple and it's proven and half the country knows its way around one. That truck asked more of you up front, and it gave every bit of it back over 20 years. What's replaced it, far too often, is a sealed box you're locked out of, sold to you cheap, tied to a company that might not even be here in 5 years, and designed quietly and deliberately to be replaced rather than repaired. The convenience is real, I won't deny that, but so is the cost. And the cost is that you don't really own the thing at all. You're just holding it until it becomes someone else's problem, or more likely, until it becomes yours. So here's what I actually want you to do with all this, because I am not sitting here telling you to never buy a Chinese ute. Some of them are good, and the value can be very real if you walk in with your eyes properly open. 1. Do not buy on the sticker price alone. Work out what it'll be worth in 3 years' time, because that gap is the real price you're paying, and on a lot of these trucks, it is genuinely brutal. 2. Look long and hard at who's actually standing behind it. And I don't mean the factory, I mean the local importer. How long have they been here? How many dealers have they got? What's their track record when things go wrong? A brand new badge with a handful of city dealers and no history at all is a gamble, no matter how good the truck feels on the test drive. 3. Match the truck to the honest truth of what you actually do with it. If you tow heavy or you head properly remote, a good half of these trucks quietly cannot do what a Ranger or a HiLux does, whatever the brochure swears. And 4, if you're buying used, walk away from the orphaned ones, the brands that already left, unless the price is so low it's basically disposable. Do those 4 things and picture where you'll be standing. 2 years from now, you're not the bloke on my hoist getting a rust quote worth more than his truck. You're not the one ringing a disconnected number about a warranty that's evaporated. You bought the right thing for the right reason, and it's still out there doing the job, and it's still worth real money. That right there is the whole game. Now I want to hear from you, because you've got hands and eyes and stories that I don't. Tell me down in the comments, which of these have you actually owned or worked on with your own 2 hands, and what did it really do out in the real world? And I especially want to hear from the Australian owners, the tradies and the tourers. Tell me your state, tell me what you tow and where you take it, and tell me honestly whether your cheap ute's been a quiet hero or a slow heartbreak. And tell me what the old mechanics in your family told you to buy and why. I read every single one of these, and I mean that, and honestly, those replies are the best part of doing this whole thing. If this saved you from a bad 40 grand mistake, the subscribe button's right there, and it costs you nothing. And next time, I'm pulling apart the single biggest lie in modern car servicing. The 2 little words printed right there in your owner's handbook that are quietly costing you a small fortune and slowly killing your gearbox while you trust them. Lifetime fluid. There is no such thing, there never was, and I'm going to show you exactly who profits from you believing there is. Look after yourselves, keep half an eye on that tray for orange flakes, and I'll see you on the next one.